So we have with us as our guest this evening Jamie Follis, otherwise known as Sillof. Did I say that right?
Sillof, Sillof, whatever you call it. So
Yeah, so thanks for being on the show. You are someone I kind of had on our short list that I wanted to get on as a guest when we started doing guests on our show, because I've admired your work over the years. I think the first time I saw anything from you, it was when you did Steampunk Wars,
yeah,
where you had a series of steampunk themed Star Wars figures, and I'm a big fan of the steampunk look. I actually have a full size R2D2 that's a steampunk R2D2,
oh, that's awesome.
so that's kind of right in my wheelhouse is some of the stuff I love. So is that the first custom you did that really like got you a lot
That's,
of attention?
that's the one. I think I did one right before that, which was I did like a Gaslight Justice League, which was like a Victorian Superman, kind of inspired by like the Gotham by Gaslight Batman. Then I thought, well, this is kind of fun. I'm a history teacher and I like the history thing. So I thought, well, what Star Wars would be like, and I just kind of started doing it. I ended up doing like 30 figures, and yeah, that one really took off. That was like on StarWars.com, and all different websites started picking it up, and that kind of I think got me more publicity. I'd been doing it since when I was a kid. I did it in the 80s. Then I did it in the 90s. Like we would customize and post on message boards and forums. But then that was the first one that really because right after that one, like Sam Witwer contacted me and he had me make him some figures. And I thought, well, I've pretty much arrived at this point because of that steampunk line.
Oh wow. Okay, so I think we need to turn back turn back the time machine a little bit. Yeah, so yeah, I first saw your Steam Wars thing, and it may have been um when you sent us some photos, there was an article, I believe it was from Bonnie Burton,
Yeah,
talking about your stuff. That may have been what, how you got my attention.
yeah, that's
What
cool. Yeah,
was from that
yeah, that was I
post.
remember that article. Yeah, it was stuff like that. It was people like at Gizmodo or Bonnie Burton or various, like I said, like Sci-Fi Channel websites posting my stuff because it was kind of niche and unique at the time. It wasn't a lot. Customizing wasn't that big. Not that it's huge now, but it was unique because what I was doing were generally like unique designs that weren't just the traditional versions of characters, which now seems kind of commonplace. You go to convention and there's all the mashups, but like when I did the Samurai Star Wars, like I spent weeks Googling it and no one had ever done like a Samurai Star Wars mashup. That was one of my rules in the beginning was if somebody else had even drawn it, I didn't want to do it. And then it was in my mind, it was more like, what would a Samurai Star Wars look like? And then I would know once I finished the line. But now you go to a convention, there's Samurai Star Wars toys, there's people cosplaying as Samurai Star Wars, so
So let's go back to, you said you've been doing this for about 25 years. What
yeah.
what was the first custom you ever did?
So a couple of years ago, Lucasfilm actually filmed a documentary, but it weirdly got bought by Verizon, and they got put on this app called Go90 that died. So there's a documentary out there where I think we kind of go through the whole history of it. Basically, the first thing I did was I chopped Luke Skywalker's hand off for Bespin. And then
Hmm.
I drilled a hole in it and put a Q-tip stick in it so I could put it back on. Right. Then I chopped Luke's head off his X-Wing pilot and put the X-Wing head on. That's when I was younger. That was the very beginning of it. And then began to kind of kit bash kind of with like just the Kenner figures when you could buy them for like, $1 at a rummage sale or 50 cents at a rummage sale because that's all you really had, and mix and match them with G.I. Joes. And then in the 90s when like the Power of the Force line 2 came back, that was like, they made like the really famous characters, but then I thought, well, they'll never make these really obscure Cantina aliens. So I eventually made every single person that you see. It's not even on my website, but I made every single person you see in the movies. And then eventually, of course, Hasbro's made everybody. And so that's what kind of led me to like moving to the 6-inch figure scale and doing the redesigns because I knew that there would never be a version of that figure because it was kind of like frustrating to like, make a really cool background Cantina character. Then they make one too. I don't know why it bothered me. So
So now what is your favorite scale to work in?
So for the bulk of my work for the past 20 years, since like 2000s, like when my website really kind of like took off, it's been mostly the 6-inch stuff. I think for the longest time that was kind of the scale. You know, you can get your Marvel Legends or your McFarlane figures, and they were in that, you know, or NECA. And it's a little bit easier to work in because you have a larger canvas to get the details and the, you know, really nice painting. Like I did, one of my first 6-inch lines was DC Direct had the 6-inch scales, and I made a set of Ralph McQuarrie figures using like DC Direct figures. So in the beginning, yeah, it was really hard. The 6-inch scale wasn't the thing, but that why I did it was like Star Wars was. I didn't think they'd ever make a Star Wars 6-inch scale, so I thought this would make it different than like the traditional. I I have just bins of body parts. It sounds weird, but I've got drawers and drawers of pieces, and if I don't have it, I'll just make it. It's just functionality. Like if I got something, I'll use it. If I don't got it, I can sculpt it. But it's just about time because I just want to. I have almost a compulsion to always be making stuff, and I don't want to be. You know, and I set a rule that I don't ever buy more than one figure if I'm going to make a figure, because you could easily spend $100 buying a bunch of 6-inch figures for one figure. So my rule is
Oh, yeah.
I buy one figure, and then if I don't have parts I can add to it, then I'll just sculpt it, because I can sculpt it if I need to. But if I don't have to, I'd rather not.
Maybe some of this stuff is from some other lines that I'm not as familiar with, but I think that's one of the things that makes your work so impressive is everything kind of looks scratch made.
Thanks. Yeah, I try to like blend the style. Like I've got figures that are 100% scratch made, and I've got like my Steampunk Boba Fett. I think had parts from 45 different figures in it, just from bins and boxes of little things here and there. But I tried to blend the style and make it look like a cohesive, seamless thing that all works together. My first line was a complete redesign of Star Wars. Then it was called Revisions, and then the idea was, what if I isolated each individual influence of Star Wars and just showcase that? So we did just samurai Star Wars, just Western Star Wars, just like Lord of the Rings fantasy Star Wars, just Flash Gordon Star Wars. And those were like the experiments of like, what would a purely Flash Gordon Star Wars have looked like? And so I'll watch a lot of movies from that era. And like I try to incorporate certain design elements and homages to those other films, certain aesthetic looks, but then also kind of looking at Star Wars and go, what about this is Art Deco that lends itself to Flash Gordon? So it's a lot of thought goes into them, and then trying to make them look like one cohesive thing.
How did you just happen to come across like all these interactions with different celebrities?
I mean, I like to think that, like, you know, my stuff was kind of unique and it kind of got people's attention. I saw like Sam Witwer was the first big one, which was weird because I was playing Force Unleashed like when I got his email, and I'm literally playing. I didn't say this, but like that was cool. And then Patton Oswalt is probably the first big one. He kept talking about me in like interviews. Like I have a print magazine interview from Empire Magazine where he's talking about me. And then he mentioned me on Twitter, and then I just reached out and I said, "Hey, thanks for the publicity." And then he was like, I've made over 3 different commissions for him over the years. And you know, when you do, he's so popular with social media that like I put a line out with him, and it's like I got 1 million hits in one day on my website. And then after my first patent line, Seth Meyers from SNL had a show called The Awesomes, and it was on Hulu. And the voice cast of The Awesomes was basically SNL, like Sam Hader and all these guys, Bill Hader and Kenan Thompson, guys like that. So they hired me to make a figure of every character on the show, which is an animated show. So they wanted me to blend the look of the actor that did it. And then they kind of gave all those to the crew as like a wrap gift. And then that kind of became my thing for a while. Like Billy Bob Thornton movie hired me, and I had to make figures of all the cast, and I gave them to the cast when they were done. And then I like Supernatural had me. I did something for the TV show Supernatural, and then I think it's just word of mouth, and people see things and go, "Oh, he works for other people. He's professional." It just kept getting more and more notoriety. And then like Stephen Colbert, and then the Mythbusters, and then I had Guillermo del Toro art show piece that he got, which was cool. So I think it's just over. I mean, I've been doing it for a long time. My name is out there.
It's great that you have a job, like a regular day job that you love as well. I love making the first of anything new.
Yeah.
But when I've cast my 700th of that part for somebody, it is a bit of a slog. And there's times where after I'm done working, there's my own stuff I want to work on, and I don't do it because
Yeah.
I'm like, I already did that for 8 hours. I don't feel like spending more of my time
Yeah.
doing it.
With my figures, like they're one of a kind. So like I can charge a little more and I got a little more notoriety. So I don't have to worry about like banging a bunch of them out. And like I can say no, like 2 years ago, I got approached by the ad agency that did like Nike's Just Do It. And they wanted me to sculpt a life-size statue of Warren Buffett. And I had to say no because they thought I was like a whole company, and I was like, I'm just a guy with a basement and a studio, so I had to say no to it. But it's like I say no to probably 95% of the stuff I get asked to do, but I can say yes to the really fun things, and then I can still focus on the things that I want to do.
I see you have a photo of the cover of the book, inspired by the Force, the Rancho Obi-Wan
Oh
book.
yeah.
I don't have my copy in front of me, but what part did you make in that? Like what page?
I made a figure. So I've worked at the Star Wars Celebration since Celebration 2, running the diorama workshop with Frank, and we recently took that over. My partner Alyssa and I, under the name DIY-orama. So we did the last Star Wars Celebration. And Steve would always be super awesome. And he'd come by the booth and he'd let us come into his booth before the show opened up. And so one year as a gift, I made him a figure of him as Obi-Wan. And then one year we went over to his booth at Celebration, and he had the figure in his booth, which I thought was like, it was super touching. Like my figure was like in the road show he was taking around. He said, "Oh no, it's in my book." So there's a picture of the figure I made of him as Obi-Wan Kenobi holding a little mini action figure of Obi-Wan Kenobi, like, 10, 15 years ago. And he included that in the book. So now I've got like, I think 6 or 7 pieces at the ranch, which is very cool just to be part of that collection.
That's nice. I have my Rebel transport in the book, and
okay.
I think the celebration you mentioned, where that was the theme, was all fan made stuff.
Yeah.
And he has the Rebel transport, which that I normally don't finish stuff, but when I got the order and I recognized who it was, I was like, holy crap, Steve Sansweet just bought something from me. And I contacted him and I said, I normally don't finish stuff, but do you want me to paint it up for you? And he said, yeah. I'm like, okay.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll look that up when we're done here. That's cool.
I've followed your work, but I was really impressed. Your craftsmanship, it's so top notch and so finished. Like, I think anything you're customizing or modeling, the kind of wash you put on it or the kind of weathering you put on it, it's very difficult to strike the right balance. And sometimes you'll see customs that just look like, to weather the figure, they put it out in the dirt and rolled it around. And then other ones, they almost look too factory made.
Yeah.
But
the wash, I mean, when I first heard about wash, was like, in the 90s, like it was a game changer. It was what makes my figures look like my figures. They've got that grimy, lived in Star Wars look. My trick is, it's just the cheap acrylic paint from like Walmart with some water, but then I wipe like 90% of it off, right? It's a lot of, you see Adam Savage do it now, and it's a lot like, put it on, take it off, put it on, take it off, just layers and layers and browns and blacks until it looks right. But it's what really, like, my figures look okay. And then that wash is always that last little bit that like makes them pop, I think.
Now, one problem that I've had with acrylics is in the joints.
Mm-hmm.
You have to shave your joints down sometimes, but because the plastic rubs against each other. Or sometimes problems I've had is it just touch it with your fingernail wrong, and it's like, you scratch some of it off.
I'll put a sealer coat on. And then years ago, I just started gluing them in position. You sell somebody a figure for the prices I'm getting, and then it gets paint rub because they were moving it a lot. It's, or they break something off. So I basically sell them as like art collectibles, like almost like a statue that looks like a figure, because I pick a cool pose, pretty generic, but like I glue them in place, and then I don't want to have to, because then people like send it back to you because they paint rubbed off at the elbow. I used to do that. I remove the material in the joints, and so now I just kind of glue them in place and then paint them from there and sell. It's more like a statue than a toy. Yeah, those are the ones I did those are my very first ones back in the 80s. So like you can see, it's like the head of like Boshek is the pilot from the G.I. Joe Sky Striker, right? Like that's me as an X-wing pilot and a Jedi there at the top next to Uncle Owen. I think the Biggs Darklighter is a GI Joe head. The Cabe, a little bad guy. Like I made that head out of like whatever passed for like clay at Michael's back in the day. Nope.
The figures that are labeled here BK,
Yeah.
what's the BK for?
So my website had its 20th anniversary in 2020, and I wanted to do something special. So the idea was the very first line I did was the revisions, which was all of the Star Wars influences together mashed up again. So then I broke down all the influences into its various lines. Then the idea was what have I learned in 20 years? So I basically did the revisions line again, and so it's samurai, western, steampunk, Flash Gordon, not steampunk, Flash Gordon, all rolled into one. So and then that was over during quarantine. I wrote a book. Most of my figures over the years, I've sold most of them just because I wouldn't have room for the thousands of figures I've made. So I wanted to have something on my shelf to kind of look at my life's body of work. And so I kind of made a book, and then those were the photos I took kind of in the Kenner style of that 20th anniversary line. And I love that. I absolutely love that line.
The R2 has 2 Lego parts as the antennas, am I right?
Yes, yeah, those are Lego parts. One of my rules is like I never want to use Star Wars parts in my Star Wars figures to make them look more unique. So yeah, those are some Lego parts. I think the arms, the legs are from the X-Files McFarlane. It was like an alien pod display piece that came with it, and I think the center part is like from like a Metal Gear figure maybe. And then the bottom is like a piece of Constructs, and then the head I sculpted, and the tank treads I made from polystyrene.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you decide to make a book, and
Yeah.
how do you go about the
So,
process?
so for me, it was just like I've always enjoyed writing. I wrote a lot in college. I had all the photos. I had taken all the photos over the years before I sold all the figures. I had kept them, and I just during COVID, I was high risk, and I just I stayed home, and I was like, I made a life size Han and Carbonite. I made a full size arcade. I just was super busy that year, and I was like, I'm gonna make a book, and I wrote it all out and all the different chapters, and I had my friend who's a editor proofread it, and I just put it on Amazon. It's super easy. You just got to download their format and upload it. And to me, I'm not looking to get rich. I just made it for myself, and I wanted to have a hardcover book that I could have on my shelf. And a lot of people have bought it, which is cool. But again, I just wanted to have it was a fun bucket list project.
Print on demand stuff. I'm imagining they probably make more on each issue than you do.
Oh yeah, and it's a bulk thing. Like, their reach is much bigger than my reach. And like I said, this isn't my retirement plan. This is just like that'd be fun. And like a more of a passive revenue stream. Cause like if I was an artist, I could sell prints. So like during COVID, I went through and it's on my site, but I made movie posters for every single line I've ever done as if steampunk Star Wars was a movie. And so now I sell those prints, it was mostly I wanted to get better at Photoshop, and now I just have a third-party print store that and again they make more money than I do, but a passive revenue stream to help out.
That's really awesome. And so I'm assuming that if someone goes to your website to order the book, it basically just links them to
the
Amazon
store
page.
Yep.
So if people wanted to commission a figure from you, how would they go about it?
So basically they just if you contact me through Instagram or my website, it's just www.sillof.com. But if you search Sillof, it'll lead you to my website or Instagram. I feel like the website's easier because Instagram, unless you follow me, I think it goes into like a certain place in my inbox that I don't see as regular.
Well, and just to view stuff, I think you need to actually sign up.
Right. Yeah. Like I'm not a huge fan of like social media, but like Instagram is such a visual medium. And so like I'll make a figure and I'll just post a figure every day and, put stuff out there. So you can contact me through the website or through Instagram. If the commission sounds cool and I have enough time, that's usually people don't mind. Like with Patton Oswalt, he just would kind of give me the amount and turn me loose. And he would be like, Star Wars meets Mad Max, or I felt like he was always trying to like stump me. And he was like, Star Wars as a Wes Anderson film. and then he just lets me go. And that's what I enjoy the most is like, I like a lot of freedom. So basically, if you're cool with like an open timeline or when I have time to get to it, and if you're cool with like giving me some freedom, like if somebody's like, oh, I want me as, a Jedi, like that's not really my jam. But if somebody has like a really fun idea that gets me excited, then it's more likely I'm going to find time to like make some time in my schedule to do that because it just sounds too cool to not do.
Well, it's definitely nice that you have that freedom.
Yeah, I think I just, years ago, like it got to the point where it was getting really big. Like it was the number one thing on Reddit. I turned down a reality show. They wanted to do a reality show, and like it was getting really, really big. And I was like, and I had to have a serious discussion. I had this thought, and I was like, I like my life. I live in a really nice town. My daughter goes to a really great school. It sounds weird, like I worked my whole life to get to that point, and then I got to that point. And if it was a movie, I would move to Hollywood, right? But like I got to that point, and I was like, you know what? I like my job. I like my life. I like where I live. I like my family. I'm going to keep my job, and I'm going to do this as a hobby and just kind of have fun with it.
Well, and by the same token, I think there is a certain specialness to that too, that you're not a pro. Because I think if you got really big and say you hired 5 other artists or something
Yeah,
all working under you, it would almost be too corporate
yeah,
and
yeah,
less at home artist.
yeah. It's got that boutique, one of a kind, handcrafted kind of thing. Like I said, I'm not a factory. Like people think like I've got a whole bunch of people where I'm like, no, it's just me and my studio. And there are people out there that like, like I'll when they had me do a couple of panels at Star Wars for customizing, and I had people on there with me that I love, like Dayton Allen, who goes by Sithfire 30. Like his stuff makes me feel bad. Like his sculpting is so good, right? Like there are better sculptors out there. There are better painters out there. I think my niche was like the uniqueness of the designs, right? But yeah, I wouldn't want to have a huge big company and no.
I wanted to get out to one of your panels at Celebration, but Celebration just being Celebration
It's
where every hour there's 3 things you wanna get to,
yeah,
or there's a line you have to stand in for the following hour to get
yeah.
to something.
Well, when I was a kid, I mean, I made movies with my friends, and I made some other movies as I got older. But like when I was a kid, I made a movie with Star Wars with my action figures, and then it's on my website. But my daughter, when she was like 5, helped me make it again with like all my cool dioramas that I had made in the 2000s. And so all the pieces I've been buying from you recently is I'm going to do it one more time with all the vintage customs I've made, but with all these really cool dioramas that I've made or bought pieces from you guys to go in, and I'm going to kind of redo an entire stop motion movie with all my vintage characters, but with all my new dioramas. So
Nice. I did not realize, looking at the YouTube channel, that you made Toy Wars.
yeah,
I did not realize. I watch a lot of fan movies from Star Wars on YouTube, and I came across Toy Wars years ago. I just never put together you hadn't made it. That's great work, man.
no, thank you. Yeah, that was me and my daughter one summer in my basement, which is like, she was pulling figures through the scene with like fishing line, and it was a fun little thing. And I was like, I had just gotten a new editor, and I wanted to try editing with my new camera, and I had all these cool dioramas I had made. And so yeah, that house holds a fond place on her because she worked on it with me, and it's like our little thing. So thank you.
No problem. And you're gonna be remaking that. That's what you're making.
Yeah, so the pieces I've been buying from Eric are going into a much larger. And I think the Toy Wars one I stopped after they left Mos Eisley because I had never done a Death Star. I didn't have any Death Star pieces made.
Figure photography's exploded in the
Yeah.
last like 5-10 years. You ever thought about getting like I it's hard to imagine the roots of where it come from. Like I saw some of your pictures where you're set up next to Frank DeOrio in his
Yeah.
diorama workshop.
Yeah.
Like, did you guys ever do anything combining on that, or?
So like that was the thing at Celebration 2, which was in Indianapolis where I'm from. I walked into Frank's booth, and I was like, I had paid to be at the convention, and I spent the entire convention in that room. I was like, I found my people. And then at C3, he brought me on as staff. And then over the years, like, we were like almost co-running it by the end, and then he stepped away from it at Chicago was his last one, and then he asked Alyssa Pierre, who's an architect, and myself to kind of take it over, and we've kept it going. But he lives in Canada, so we were never really able to like collaborate on big projects. Our kind of, I would say, like our collaborations are those huge dioramas that we built at the Star Wars celebrations all those years.
You know, I'm really kind of wondering now if we may have actually crossed paths, because my wife and I have, I think it was Celebration 5, the first Orlando one.
Yeah.
And then the second Orlando one and the Anaheim one. We went to all three of those and worked on the diorama. And I remember a lot of times Frank wasn't around sometimes.
Yeah.
And so we may have even crossed paths. And
it is. I guarantee that we probably did. It's such a blur. Like I started following a guy called the Smuggler's Room, and he's like turning his basement into a Star Wars room. And I sent him an email, and he was like, "Oh no, we talked at Celebration a bunch." It's such a blur because like I'm in that booth and I don't leave the booth, and it's just a sea of people's faces and names. So I guarantee that we probably talked and met. So at the next one, come find me, and then we can kind of put a face to a name. And
Frank kind of, you know, got me started thinking about the making diorama part thing.
Yeah.
Because some of the first dioramas I started making, I was using his plans.
His generosity with like making all those stickers and templates and just putting on his website for free, right? I mean, we had kids come to that thing, right? Who are now have their own kids who come to that booth, like people who like they come to that booth every year. It's like part of their convention experience. So at the last celebration, we had the biggest footprint of anything in the convention. I mean, so there's a huge niche. Like, you know, over the years, like I remember like Kathleen Kennedy came through and Bob Iger. And we met George Lucas. There's that one picture of me and George Lucas, like all because of that booth, right? And so yeah, it was a really super cool experience, and to keep it going now has been awesome. So we've already been talking with Lucasfilm. We were possibly going to go to London, but I think we're not going to go to London. But we'll probably be at the next domestic.
I'm really hoping and praying it's in Orlando again, because that is drivable for my wife and I.
Yeah,
we have our van done up as a Star Wars vehicle, and so the last Orlando show, we were actually in the convention center with all the Star Wars cars.
Oh yeah, well, I'm sure I saw your van then. Oh, I guarantee I have a picture of it. I'll go back and look through my pictures.
I would definitely like to thank you for coming on. Like I said, this was kind of one of those things where you were on the short list, you know, as far as, hey, what guests do we want to have on? And I knew you were one that I wanted to have on for a long time. So,
well, thank you. It means a lot to me. It's my pleasure. Like I said, I mean, I love the pieces you sell. It's my pleasure to be on it, and it means a lot that you wanted to have me on. It's a pleasure. I just enjoy talking Star Wars with other people who like Star Wars and are creative as well. So, but thanks a lot for having me on, guys.
Yeah, you take it easy.
Yeah, take it easy. I'll see you guys later.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate the info. Great.
Awesome. Have a good night.